Yes, it's Tuesday, a few minutes after noon Pacific time. So if you check right here, what it's Biden time. Welcome to Biden time. As always, I am Christian Bladt, joined today by Drexel Hurd. Drexel, great to see you as always, and of course, also with us as always, the one and only Tamra Brown. Hey, Tamra. Hey,
Hey
wait,
there.
that's your screen name. Hey, Tamra. I
Oh,
didn't even mean it.
see, he finally caught on.
Yeah, wait a minute. Welcome to the show, Drexel. Great to have you. Thank you for giving us a little time. You
Always
were
good to be back.
you were part of our original Trump versus Hillary panel, which was only almost 5 years ago now, or
It seems like
almost
yesterday,
almost
though.
6 years ago now, I guess. So yeah, a little bit's happened since then. Take a quick moment to let people know what you're up to now and how that's going to tie into what we discussed today on the show.
Uh, well, like I said, it's good to be back. Hello, Tamara. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Um,
And by the way, just look down. You can see who's saying hello to you too.
Storage Yard
Storage
resident.
Yard resident.
Hello. Good to see you and all those folks who've been a part of our little family since since Trump versus Hillary. No, right now I'm still the executive director of the Los Angeles Democratic Party, which is the nation's largest, local Democratic Party, and so we're busy. We got 300 races this year, so it's going to be a busy time for me, and navigating these political landmines here in Los Angeles and the state. So, it's a little busy. I'll say, but I luckily get a chance to. I'm in my office right now, as you can kind of see, but lot of Biden
Yeah,
stuff here. So I'm really on brand today.
that's
Really,
good.
really on the nose with that stuff today. But no, it's good to be back and good to have a little time.
Yeah, well, I think a great place to start is, so we're just a few days into the second year of the Biden presidency, and I think as we were reaching the end of the first year, there was a lot of analysis. There's been a lot of focus on just a lot of poll numbers. Interestingly, one story I saw was that the highest poll numbers for President Biden comes from Fox News, which has him at a 47%. Obviously, there's varying numbers, and I would say that the takeaway can really be that he's not particularly popular in a number of circles and for a variety of reasons. So I thought that this was a perfect week to have you on, Drexel, to let's start focusing on, okay, in the past year, what have been some good things that maybe Democrats in the audience that can think about, like, what did go right,
Do we
what
have
did go well.
Democrats in this audience? I'm
Are
not.
they
I'm not even clear on
they're
that.
they're usually they're usually not the ones that comment.
We don't have to comment on things. We just kind of listen to the. That's a good question because I think I'll start with the obvious of where the president's poll numbers are right now, right? Obviously, the pandemic is at his feet right now. Folks are, depending on where you are in the country, feeling the effects of the pandemic, not only in their businesses, but in their homes, childcare, anything like that. So, of course, the White House is going to be responsible for that, and the poll numbers are reflecting that. On the upside is, last year, the president had an incredible infrastructure package that passed. We're seeing that here in California, where they're pumping in millions of dollars to fix our rail and our metro and different things that are needed across the state. Even Mitch McConnell said in a little gaggle or whatever fundraiser he was at in Kentucky maybe a couple months ago, he said the quiet part out loud, which was, hey, we know Republican voted for this, but you're about to get a lot of money. So once states and those uh, businesses and those local governments start to understand what the federal government is going to be providing for them infrastructure wise, I think the president's going to be in a good position to start going around the country. If you saw what he said in his 3-hour press conference the other day, he's going to start getting out there. I think they are starting to pivot and get the president out there on the trail a little bit more to talk about the things that are coming up. Um, the president was able to bring in through legislation through the Congress, expanding on the child tax credit. which has been helping families. I know that it's helped a lot of my friends who have kids, who have smaller kids right now. I'm sure, Christian, you've got two little ones, and I know that I'm sure you got a little bit of that child
I
tax
just
credit as well.
I just got a letter from the IRS yesterday reminding me how much
Reminding you,
that
right?
I got during the
Yeah.
year. So to make
And
sure that
so,
at tax time, yeah, but no, it's like I had the kids anyway, so I didn't have to do
right,
anything extra
right.
to
So
get that. So it's been great. Yeah.
yeah, my point is that as folks start to understand where, and not just the president, but where Democrats have put their focus on, um, it, it will numbers will start to change. The problem is that the press, unfortunately, is so focused on the failure of Big Build Back Better and where it is right now, because everybody's looking forward to that. Everyone is looking forward to the fact that like 80% of American people, or whatever it is, want this Build Back Better package to pass. But we've got a couple of senators who are making that a little bit more difficult. So, and for a president who has touted himself as, a deal maker, that is a key. That is huge, to not have your party in lockstep right now, and so he's going to have to turn that around a little bit.
Yeah, and look, I think that the way that the government is currently constituted, I think both parties are certainly ones that have done this. When their opposition is the one in power, that's just like, well, we don't want to help the president. And for a lot of things, there's a lot of issues that Republicans are like, no, even though we might agree with this, and then there's always the things that come along that everybody votes on, or almost everybody except Ted Cruz votes for, and almost everybody votes. There's a couple of things that get passed because it's like, all right, we have to. If pay raises for members of Congress ever came up, they would all find a way to vote for that, and there's always that sort of a thing. Perfect example. I remember now that there was this story yesterday. There was this letter that was signed by such a wide variety, like a bipartisan group of so like the squad's in there, Matt Gaetz and Kevin McCarthy. No, actually they were basically all of these, this pro-Trump crowd and what they refer to as the squad were both saying that there should be a floor vote banning lawmakers from trading stocks, which that seems like one of those things that, a lot of times conversation on this show will turn into like, yeah, term limits aren't a terrible idea. I don't know what the right number is, but it seems like it could probably be good, and those are the sort of things that it's like, well, yeah, but of course, who's going to vote for term limits? Because that means like, well, I gotta find a different job in, 12 years or whatever. So also like voting for, hey, who shouldn't be able to trade stocks is all of you guys and gals. No, we're not going to vote for that. What are you, crazy? That's where I make my real money. So, there are those issues that come up a lot, and you can see that there can be some agreement, but the bigger agreement will be things like we don't want term limits. We don't want to slash the salary for us. What are things that maybe surprise you? Is it that so much of President Biden's agenda can be, the perception is that it's really held up by two Democratic senators, but you also should be able to, I don't know, you should be able to give Mitt Romney like a big nice pitcher of sweet tea and be like, come on, don't you want to enjoy this? Let's talk about it. You should be able to find somebody that can compensate for that, but it's really just the ultimate in gridlock. Is that what we're seeing? That's sort of the long meandering way to ask that question, Drexel.
I think, it's like a game of chess, right? I think if your strategy is not working, because what happens is like I said on this, use Build Back Better, for example, because it's such a big bill, they could cut it up. They should have used the time that they have and taken key parts of that and just start to vote on them and force votes on these smaller packages to get what they want. Should just broken it apart and just started voting on everything. and seeing where Republicans are. And like we saw with Voting Rights Act the other day, you know, people went on the record. People had to be on the record for certain things, and so that's what I think that's going to have to be the strategy going forward right now. And that's what I'm a little surprised they haven't they have not used that same strategy they've used on voting rights to put people on the record for smaller, more popular portions of Build Back Better, and then see where that lands.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't cast a secret ballot for the Baseball Hall of Fame, you should be able to, make people publicly go on record to, when they oppose something. Tamra, in terms of this past year, what are some of, and you don't have to necessarily be disappointed in President Biden, you could be disappointed just in general. As you look back on the last year, what are some of the things that you're most disappointed in that Drexel will do what he can to try and fix for you right now?
Well, I think definitely any lack of progress on climate change. We just continue to approve more oil contracts and things like that. Those things don't get much media coverage. The It's just a general lack of anything. Like I said last week, just this nothing to be inspired by. And not that, I was all excited voting for Biden in the first place, but there's just hasn't been anything to that I felt like this could really be something on the federal level. In the state of California, I'm really excited about AB 1400. We're gonna take a stab at CalCare,
which that originated out of this office.
Oh yeah,
nice.
It did, because the LA Democratic Party was the first to start pushing AB 1400, working with Ash Kalra and working with Miguel Santiago on that. So
take a moment to explain what that would do and sort of, how that could be relevant to people in the other states and around the world, just sort of knowing what that's going to mean for our state.
Well, go ahead, Tamara, because I think that's a bill that you...
I don't think I know. Why don't you? It's all right.
No, it's totally fine. No, right now it's a few years ago we had AB 562, and it failed. It was a bill that would have made expanded Medicare for all and made it healthcare for all, basically. And so here in California, but the problem was that it failed because it didn't have a funding mechanism. And one of the things that anybody who is a speaker or anybody who has to control votes knows is that you don't want something to go through if you don't have all the components. And so the original bill a few years ago failed, which it turned activists a little loopy because they didn't understand why it failed the way that it did. And so that bill, a new version of that bill, AB 1400, came up last year. They made it a 2-year bill. They punted it to the beginning of this year. When it first was introduced, I remember sitting with a couple of the legislators talking about what that strategy would look like. Here in LA, we commissioned all of the chairs from all the 58 counties to say, hey, we want you, all of your central committees and all of your county Democratic parties to help sign on to this. A lot of them did. We have 100 clubs here activated here, Democratic clubs here in Los Angeles County. And we have sent them emails saying we want your club to buy in on this and support AB 1400, because the more support it is for a bill to make sure, especially in the middle of a pandemic right now, where healthcare costs are skyrocketing, and we want to make sure that folks know that California is going to take care of them when things go wrong. They're not going to go bankrupt for that. And it's really odd to me that those who are a little bit against either the expansion of Medicare or the full access to healthcare for all, not wanting to help their fellow neighbor not go into debt for medical reasons outside sometimes and most times out of their control, is a little disappointing. Because we're a country that looks to wanting to help each other. And this is one of those times we can do that. And the pandemic has shown that we're going to have to do that right now. And so AB 1400 is going to be really important for the state of California, and hopefully a barometer for where other states can go if they can get there.
Yeah, I think that it's there are a lot of, if you live in a state like California, there probably is a lot more for Democrats to at least be able to point to. And there are obviously people in the audience right now who would feel like they wouldn't want to live in a state that has vaccine mandates for a number of, they're talking about, I was reading a story today about Los Angeles County and San Diego County have proposals for that. And the school district that my kids are in, Burbank, has been very hesitant to do that because honestly, they're just really worried about lawsuits, because they're just like, once you say that you have to do it, then things get tied up. So they're sort of like, let's see how it plays out for the bigger school district, and
Sure.
it's a lot of like, we recommend you get tested every week, and that sort of a thing. But that's what I think is the biggest part of people's lives, I think, right now, is the pandemic and how their state is dealing with it. And for a lot of people, a lot of people that I know, and I read their social media posts, they're they just shake their heads when they see people show up at something that's outdoors and everyone's wearing masks. And then in California, I think people feel a lot differently. And it's, it just sort of depends on your own personal comfort level as to what's going on where you are. For the national idea, Drexel, so Tamara sort of mentioned, and she did mention it in our previous show, this idea that, it's hard to get excited. And you talked about President Biden should go out there and bang the drum a little bit more and, talk up what they have done, what they want planned. Apart from that, what do you think are, some of the things that make sense to focus on? I mean, there's little things that are quick fixes, like you're having trouble finding COVID testing. Well, we're going to send a bunch to you. Although our guest last week, Nate, talked about the, he has a few roommates, and they are getting 4 for his address. So I told him,
can't get one because
I told,
they
I
count an
told Nate,
entire apartment building as one address.
so basically you guys have to share the 4. So yeah. So then anyway, that's a perfect example. That's like, oh, that seems like a good fix. But for a lot of people, there's then problems in terms of actually getting them. So whether it's pandemic related or not, what do you think should be, one, what the White House is like? Let's focus on this. Yes, we have Build Back Better. Let's try to, give people tangible ideas of what that means. And then of course the party as a whole, where do you think, I mean, obviously there should be something of a united front, but what do you think would be the things to focus on to make people realize here's some stuff to be excited about in 2022?
Well, I think here's the thing is that and Tamara, said something that it's always very interesting, and not that I don't disagree. It's just very interesting to hear when people say, I need to be inspired by something, right? Because government is not designed to be an inspiring institution. It is designed to be there to take care of people. It's like your parent. Your parent is there to be someone who is supposed to say, "Hey, this is what you need to do in life, and make sure you get what you need." Government is not there to be a TV show. It's not there to be something exciting. It's not exciting. I can tell you, I live it every day, and so it is a grinding place, that at the end of the day, you hope that if you put in, 20 bills or 100 bills or whatever, you might get 10 good ones out of there in a single term. I mean, you remember what happened with President Obama in 2010 with just the Affordable Care Act. Once he used all that political clout in 2010 on one bill, the next big bill should have been immigration, or they should have been at the same time. And he used all that political capital on that. And so I think right now, the president put a lot of emphasis on infrastructure, Build Back Better, voting rights, right? Voting rights is the only thing that Democrats should be dealing with right now, because it is the most crucial piece to the future of democracy right now. And I know people don't like to think that, but what we're seeing all across the nation, are people Republicans doing what they can to make sure to make it harder to vote. And I think I can't remember what senator it was on the floor. There's a clip out there somewhere. I can't remember who it was, but they said I think it was John Cornyn or Senator Thune, one of the two, had said, 90% of Americans said it was easier to vote in the last election. And Senator Schumer said, yeah, that's the point. Like what's wrong with that? It sounds so crazy. And so Republicans have whipped up this frenzy with people by saying, oh, there's illegal, voting happening. And then it has turned the tides. It's like vaccine mandates, right? The moment that you say that you've mandated, we have been conditioned, thanks to the Trump administration, as if the government telling people what to do is a bad thing. We've been doing it our entire lives. The difference between and I know somebody in the chat just said, "Oh, vaccine mandates, my body, my choice." The difference is my body, my choice is a phrase used for women in their individual bodies, not the entire public health for those around you. And so when women make individual choices about their body, it's not for somebody else. It is for them. With when we're dealing with our vaccines, whether or not we're kids or whether or not we're in school and we have to go and do all that kind of those vaccine mandates, or we have to wear seatbelts or anything like that, that is not just for us. That is for the protection of everybody else around us. And so the Trump administration has kind of warped this idea that that when the government comes in to say something, that it is bad. The government is there to say, hey, look, we know what's going to happen. And we're seeing the science of that. And so I think a little bit of I think people have got to just take a step back and realize that government is not there to be your friend. It is there to do a job.
But everybody in the government seems so friendly, as though they are there to be my friend. So I'm not quite
well,
sure.
They're not Betty White.
Yeah, they're all folks. They're just like us.
They're just like stars, just like exactly right. And,
yeah.
and it's so interesting because like the same pressure that the pressure that we put on celebrities, for example, is not the same pressure that we put on politicians on some level. And because if you look at Marjorie Taylor Greene, like she's crazy,
Yeah.
But somehow she's like not being held to the same level that we would anyone else, probably because she's a little nutty. But
just to interject, specifically, I think we hold Kanye to a higher standard than we do Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. That's my point. You've got a member of Congress who could do actual damage to her state, to her district. It's not like they're pumping a lot of money. And here's the thing: for those who I'm sure you guys have talked about it, but like the job of a United States Congressperson or a United States Senator is to make sure that their state or their district gets the resources they need from the federal government.
Right.
If they can't do that, then they're useless. And so so then everybody goes, oh, well, the federal government shouldn't be in this and that, and you're like, actually, your representative is supposed to be bringing money back to you. It's supposed to be making sure that your local government has that, because your local government, especially on states and local governments who don't have sales tax or any sort of taxes in that, where do you think they get the money to do those big infrastructure projects? It's got to come from somewhere. And if Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz and all these people don't want that for their district, we welcome that here in Los Angeles County. We've got plenty districts here in LA County that could use that money.
Right. There's a lot of comments going on in the chat, but I wanted to bring up this one from Keith's dad, which, maybe one day Keith will be in here, but we appreciate Keith's dad being here. Bipartisan bills pass. If it's a single party agenda, it's usually dead on arrival. Sure. And he's using air quotes because, of course, there's exceptions. But the question is, how do we get those single party agenda items, and should we get those? And I guess the idea is, my interpretation of that question is, how do we really, make these issues bipartisan issues, And I think that, Tamra, that's how a lot of times climate change definitely gets pushed aside, because that has, as unreasonable as it might seem, the planet we live on is apparently a non-bipartisan. It's a very partisan issue. So it's hard, so it's like when that's involved in something, it's like, well, I can't vote for it. I mean, the micro example would be like, oh, there's funding for coal in there, so we have to not use it, so
exactly, until we get money out of money, corporations funding politicians. I mean, that there's not going to be a way to pass a bipartisan legislation anymore until there isn't legislators that are, catering to their funders. And climate change is the biggest example. The most drastic example right now is the fact that, oil companies are powerful. They hold all of the power, and as long as oil companies hold the power financially, then we're not going to make any progress in any direction that's going to save ourselves. We're not going to have water in 100 years. Portions of this earth are going to be unlivable within all of our own lifetimes. I mean, it's in front of our eyes. We are seeing these things happen, and yet somehow we're just barely shuffling our feet at all on any sort of step in the right direction. So as long as money plays such a huge part of campaigning and getting into office, that's I don't see how any sort of compromise and any sort of bipartisan understanding is going to be made.
Well, anytime money in politics comes up, it makes me wistful, because we miss our pal Chelsea Galicia, and because that was always a very important issue for her, and it was right, because it all goes back to that. What gets voted on and what gets passed, depends on how much money there is behind it. It's hardly a softball question, Drexel. Is there a way to take an issue like climate change and realistically get, you're not going to get 98 senators to vote for it, but is there a way to make it more palatable to a more bipartisan issue, that and is it just saying like, yeah, space aliens caused it, but can we spend money on fixing it? Let's just ignore what caused it and let's just try and fix it. Is that the fix? I don't know what it is.
I think you got to start with the root, right? Which is the people who have the obligation to vote and who are representing have to believe in it first. They have to believe that there's a problem first. And with 208 Republican House members and 50 Republican senators not interested in even having a conversation on climate change because it is not palatable to their electorate, even though their electorate is the one that is suffering the most from the effects of climate change, especially in those poor areas, in those flyover states, and in smaller, poorer counties, in other red states, in Arizona, in New Mexico, and some of these other places. They've got to believe that first. So that's the fundamental thing that we've got to get over for anything to pass. But I think I could tie it into what Keith's dad had said about who's responsible for the job of the government. I think the federal government is there to set the standard, and it is up to local governments to execute what they've been given. So when federal money pours into the state, and then it's up to the local government, it's up to the state government to allocate and the local governments to decide how they want to execute that. And that's how government actually works. And how it's supposed to work. We're getting billions, like I said, billions of dollars here in California for many things. A couple of weeks ago, the Governor Newsom just put out an entire new budget that includes some climate change initiatives in it, And so those are the kinds of things that can happen at the state and local level, and those are the decisions that can be made. The federal government can only say whether or not we're in the Paris Climate Agreement. Hey, this is what this is where the United States stands. We're actually going to put more money into climate change per state so that they can decide how they want to allocate that money. But if states are not willing to accept that money, especially in those red states, then there's not much you can do. And it's like states not accepting Medicaid money. Why wouldn't you? I mean, we've seen states do that. We've seen Republican governors straight up say, I don't want that money. I don't want that money to help my constituents. And then they wonder why their electorate keeps dying out. I don't know what to tell them.
Right. And, one of the things that, unfortunately, on the various incarnations of this show that comes up anytime there's any sort of public shooting, whether it's a school shooting or just anywhere in public, we always sort of come back around to the idea of you feel like on these issues, people aren't willing to get into a room and even try to just talk about it. I'm not saying that I expect something to get fixed overnight. It's just the perception of, oh, you sat down with the other side on that issue. Clearly, you've betrayed us. And it's like the idea of listening to each other, both sides listening. I mean, climate change would be one of those, any kind of gun reform. Because I feel like calling it gun control is that already can be a divisive, just calling it that. And I think that's just really what it comes down to is, I guess when the government is so evenly split and, I can't remember it ever being quite, this narrow really in terms of, a president where his party is in control, but it's really not. Because
do you remember when Barack Obama was doing that big round table publicly on ACA? It had it was Boehner, it was what's his name? Who is the Virginia? Who is this?
Was it still Trent Lott?
No, it was who's the little glasses young guy from Virginia. He left. Oh God, I can't remember that guy. I could see his little Weasley eyes in my head. But anyway, so the president had held this big round table with Republicans on one side, Democrats on the other side, and he said, "Let's talk about ACA. Let's talk about how we can get this, how we can talk about this in a bipartisan way for the American people to see." Joe Biden should do that. Should have done that on voting rights. He should have done that on Build Back Better, because the narrative is, for Republicans, is, oh, we never were part of those conversations.
Right.
Because they're able to say that because we haven't been able to see what's been going on behind the scenes. So they could straight up just be like, yeah, we were never, even though Kevin McCarthy's probably sitting in a room with Nancy Pelosi being like, hey, how do we whip this? We know that Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell, they have a decent relationship. So it's not like they weren't talking to each other about like where their caucus is and how to get them in line. But the president has got to say, you know what? I'm gonna do the same thing that Barack Obama did on ACA on these major pieces of legislation. We're going to do it publicly, and then we're going to have that conversation. And it worked for ACA, so I can't imagine that it would not work, because then people have to perform, and they have to explain things out loud. And Republicans have not been put on full display explaining why. And the president said it in his 3-hour press conference the other day. He said, "What are Republicans for? What are they for?" We have never, ever asked that question. It just needs to be asked every day by every reporter every day to Republicans when they do their press conferences.
One other thing before we run through some headlines, the expectation is that specifically the House will flip Republican after November, but obviously that is almost 10 months away. So what would you say to Democrats who feel dejected about that idea? And what, a lot of things can happen in 10 months. What are some things that the average voter can try and do to help maybe make things happen that might maybe not prevent that, but at least put a good showing for the Democratic Party in November?
So I think the perception that Republicans are going to flip the House, I mean, they might get close. I think it's going to be close either way. I don't think they
Yeah.
fully flip the House. I think it's just going to be close. We've seen in the courts right now, especially in some of the more Republican states, where courts are striking down gerrymandered maps that Republicans have tried to draw. And they're actually being redrawn right now by independent commissions. Here in California, we have an independent commission that drew the lines for the state and federal districts. And so we're not out of the game, so we don't have to work. We're not out of the game completely. But I do think that Democrats, we have a big messaging problem. We've talked about this for years. We're not very good at explaining things. Barack Obama wasn't good at it. Joe Biden's been a little bit better at it over the past few weeks at touting the accomplishments of the administration. I'm a big fan of just getting out there and going across the country and saying, this is what we're doing. The president has the opportunity to saturate the airwaves, because anywhere he goes, the media is going to go. And that's what the White House has to do. And they need to be doing it with Democrats in key districts by their side, and having it streamed on CNN and MSNBC and Fox and all the C-SPAN and all this stuff, so that people have an idea of what actually is happening. And they need to be actually having conversations. They need to pull a Hillary Clinton and have a little listening tour over the next few months, an actual national listening tour, and say, hey, look, we're out here talking. This is what, tell me what you want. And they need to be doing that a little bit better.
Well, Keith's dad seems to be in step with that thinking. He says, I wish Biden would give us a clear plan, but he's been saddled with problems that not only have no end, but have already shown us that they can mutate. He's riding a wave of uncertainty, which seems to certainly be a great way to sort of summarize this. It is definitely a wave of uncertainty. I think that these last few years are not anything anybody could have mapped out. Tamra, do you personally, doesn't even have to be based on anything, do you feel like it's inevitable that at least the House will go Republican, or are you optimistic in any way that maybe Democrats will be able to figure out a way to hang on to the House over the next 10 months or so?
Well, I really don't know. I mean, I think all we've been hearing about is how that the House is going to flip. Hearing Drexel say that he's thinking that it would be more close, not necessarily going to flip. That I trust his opinion on that, so that's nice to hear. But it doesn't mean
it's possible.
Doesn't mean it's not. Yeah. I mean, I think that the amount of voters that come out, a lot's going to have to do with things like what's happening locally that people are going to go out and vote on. If there's something that's happening on the local level that is going to get people out to vote, I think that's one way that Democrats, um, especially in California, if there's something on the bill that's a social issue or something that's going to energize people to vote, then they're going to go ahead and vote, down the ballot for the rest of the party. So I think that it depends on what else is going on the ballot, will determine what voter turnout and how successful keeping the Democrats' slight edge in the House. I really don't know. I don't know what to expect.
Yeah. And just a little follow-up on that again from Keith's dad. Thanks for being so involved this week. I don't know if flipping the House would really do anything differently. The president still has veto powers. He'd just get to use it.
Yeah. And he's not wrong, because if you have close votes in the House and the Senate, you can't override a presidential veto. And so then it will really be gridlock, and Republicans, here's the thing. If you look, the Republicans had the House, the Senate, and the presidency for 4 years, almost under Donald Trump, or at least for a little while under Donald. Was it 3 years under Donald Trump?
Yeah.
And they did nothing with it. And so that's the reality is they did not. Let me rephrase that. They did a lot of things. They did nothing to help the American people. They did nothing to put money back into the pockets of the American people. You know, the Trump tax cuts did not help the average American family or the average American voter. So what do they have to show for that is the question. And while infrastructure is not sexy or cool or exciting, you know, I ran over a pothole the other day and it like almost wiped out my car. Like just they had to replace the rim, you know,
Right.
and I was lucky that I know people where I was just like, hey, you know, I called the city council member and I said, hey, this pothole is not great where this is. You know, you guys need to get on that. And that's an infrastructure thing. That's not something that is exciting, but that's their job. And so I think people have to realize that their local governments are equally as important than as the federal government, because all we see on TV is the federal government, but everything else is so important locally. And so I always encourage people to actually, if you don't know your city council member, if you don't know your state representative, I think probably now is the time to do that, because those are the actual people that actually affect the things that are happening. And I've said this when we were doing Trump versus Hillary. I said this when we were doing the show right before that, which I can't remember. What was the name of that show?
We had Trump versus Hillary.
Trump
Well,
versus
you had
Hillary.
a show. You had a
The Trump
show.
report. I had political beat. We had the
Yeah.
Trump report. So my point is if you don't know who is actually leading your city, I always challenge people. I say, do you even know your congressperson? For all the talk that people say, oh well, President Biden's not doing anything. I'm like, you don't even know who's representing you. So let's start with that, and then go from there.
Yeah.
And then maybe you'll understand a little bit more. Get in contact with your local representatives, and they will help you.
And
Because
that
that's
goes
what their
for
job is.
and
Go
that
ahead,
goes for
Tamra.
media too. I mean, whenever I say that to people, whenever people complain that you know you can't trust the media is so biased, the media is so biased, and it's like, well, do you ever watch? Do you have a local newspaper? Do you watch your local news? Who, you know, those are the ones that are as close as you can get to as just reporting news instead of opinion these days. But unfortunately, those smaller media outlets are still getting bought out, but they do still exist. So the same goes for media. Just like niche down,
Yeah.
find your local paper, find your local network.
Also, after your explanation, Drexel, I think that suddenly there are going to be a lot of tweets at Drexel Hurd every time somebody encounters a pothole in Los Angeles. They're going to be like, "Wait, maybe Drexel can get this
Yeah, give
fixed."
me the city council. Right.
Yeah, it's like,
It was
yeah,
pretty
it's
bad. It was a deep pothole.
yeah.
It was really crazy.
At Cahuenga and Santa Monica, there's a pothole. What can you do, Drexel?
And you know what's so interesting is that like I don't make those kind of phone calls. Like I just don't. Not in this. Like you know, I just don't. And
Right.
so I was literally like, if it wasn't for the fact, what happened was I ended up going to get my tire fixed, and they asked me, where did you hit it? And there were 4 other cars that had that same
Oh,
issue.
wow.
And I literally was like, you know what? Obviously, this is a problem. So let me just make a phone call. And I remember the next week I was driving by to go get my haircut, and they were paving it over. And
Nice.
so, you know, but it's not just like people like me that can make those phone calls. Everybody watching can literally make those phone calls because government officials want something to do. They want to be. Their egos are big enough to want people to feel like they are doing something for their constituents. And constituent services is their number one job at the local level, which is why I run LA Democratic Party, which is, like I said, the largest local Democratic Party in the country, and we know exactly what our representatives are doing. We've been lucky to have 100% Democrats for the most part, 99% with Mike Garcia in Los Angeles County, and so we're lucky for that.
You were talking about this idea if Republicans do take over the House. So is it safe to say that you disagree with Newt Gingrich's assertion that Liz Cheney and other members of the January 6th committee would go to jail if Republicans were to win back the House? Obviously, he doesn't hold office anymore, but people do listen when he said it. And Liz Cheney actually commented. She responded to this idea that they would go to jail. But I think that is sort of a lot of what the promise is on the Republican side.
The same jail that Hillary was put into.
I do remember a promise that she would be locked up a number of years ago, actually. That I have not heard. I have not heard of that happening, but maybe it's a much slower plan than that. But it's sort of like a joke question, but it really is the expectation. Just like the expectation was, Democrats were like, oh, well, we got the president and, we have the tiebreaker in the Senate and we have the House. It was like, they still can't really get that much done. So it's like, if the House does flip, it's not going to be by a wide margin. So it'll basically just be exactly where we are now.
Yes,
right?
Yeah. I think Newt Gingrich, first of all, he's lucky because his wife is a United States ambassador under this president. She's ambassador to the Holy See. So she's ambassador to the Pope, basically.
Yeah.
And so, for him to go out there, when folks say stuff like that, it's always very interesting to me. But, I think he's just placated to that Fox News audience who wanted to see Hillary Clinton locked up. That's what it was. And it's just like, listen, it's not going to happen. And it's such a waste of money. And the idea that somebody like Newt Gingrich, who was Speaker of the House, to not understand the gravity of what happened. Had he been Speaker of the House at the time of January 6th, I'm sure he'd be asking for the same thing. And, I think any speaker would have, because their members would have been in trouble. But if they're not, that tells you exactly who they are. Look at Kevin McCarthy here. Kevin McCarthy, who is in LA County.
Yeah.
And he is the minority leader of 208 members. The fact that he's not out there saying, hey, you know what? My members were in trouble that day. We got to figure this out. That he's not still saying that, because he said it the next day and he said it the day after that. But then he changed his tune a little bit. Is worrisome. And I think people should realize when people, as Maya Angelou says, or as Oprah would say, when people show you who they are, believe them. That's exactly who Kevin McCarthy is. That's exactly who Newt Gingrich is. That's exactly who Republicans in this world are right now. And it's unfortunate because they're only placating to an audience of one. To Keith's dad's question, I am a Slytherin.
I was going to make sure we got that in there. He asked, what Hogwarts house are you? Well, Tamra, I want to make sure we get a very important question in here. And the important question, of course, being, is Pete Ducey a stupid son of a bitch? That's the important question that we have.
I think we all know the answer to that now, don't we? I'd have to say that's kind of the first inspiring thing I've heard Biden say in a long time. That's the kind of stuff. See, it's, a lot of times that flashy, the thing that Trump supporters loved about Trump, obviously, is that they loved hearing him say things on a hot mic, or say something that a political candidate shouldn't say. And, every once in a while, when we do get those type of things from a Democratic legislator, it is just a little bit satisfying.
Drexel, obviously the exchange is relatively funny, and the president did call Pete Ducey on his cell phone after and be like, it's not personal, pal. I love that he called him pal, by the way. Because it's just like, but I do think, for all the things that, Pete Ducey asks, where you put your arm up, I think it's important to have that person in the room. Jim Acosta was that person in the room for Trump. Jake Tapper did an excellent job for ABC News to President Obama. It was always like, he would take the question and you could kind of see it in his eyes. It's like, all right, what's he going to ask me that I don't want to talk about? So I do think that it is important to have that voice. It maybe was a little bit of a stupid son of a bitch question, because, what was the answer going to be? Like, no, inflation's actually great. I don't even know what you're talking about. Why would that be bad?
And if you remember, there was a clip going around the internet of John McCain actually saying something to Pete Ducey out of a question. He said, "Are you really that stupid?" Or something that John McCain said to Pete Ducey back then. And look, I get it. Being a journalist is hard. I know that I don't make it easy for journalists here in LA when they call me, but it everybody has a job to do, and I think that Pete Ducey. I think there is a way to approach. There is a way for Pete Ducey to have been a Jake Tapper or have been a Jim Acosta if the questions were tailored not specifically to a Fox News audience that weren't gotcha questions. And I don't think that Jake Tapper or Jim Acosta ever did gotcha questions like that to a Donald Trump or to a Barack Obama. But Pete Ducey knows what he's doing to placate his Fox News audience, and it's unfortunate that he's not seen that he could be seen as a serious White House correspondent or a serious journalist if he wasn't so, dare I say, douchey.
So you're calling him Pete Douchey? Is that what you're saying? By the way, does Newsmax still have a seat in the front row in the press briefing room? I don't know. You know, they had a really good seat for a little while there. I don't know that they do anymore. Yeah, Keith. Obviously, we're treating it a little bit lightly, but of course he is. Not sure if a sitting president calling him that is right. And yeah, he thinks that Biden was frustrated at the entire press, but he's an easy target. No, and look, the idea, none of the reporters were very nice to Biden lately, but the idea that government isn't our friends, the press don't need to be nice to any politician ever. The fact that they are sometimes, regardless of which president it is like, all right, yeah, every once in a while, sure, why don't you put a softball up there? But just be ready to do your job and ask those questions. I want to.
We said that for Donald Trump. The press didn't need to be his friend. We've said that for Barack Obama. The standard. That's the difference between Democrats and Republicans. We use the same standard, and the Republicans move the goalposts. And so, on standards. Yeah. And so that, I think, listen, we're not asking the press to be nice to President Biden. We know that the president is not very interested in press conferences, but when he is, he's out there for 3 hours.
Yeah.
That's a long time. And for somebody who people think doesn't have, all the screws, tightened. I mean, the man was there for 3 hours the other day. That's a long time for a sitting president to spend with the press. And Donald Trump just liked the attention.
I can't even stay awake for 3 hours of Squid Game. I mean, I need a nap after 3 hours of
I need a break in between Titanic when I watch it. I mean, it's too much.
Well, that's why in the old days when it was on the VHS, before you switch the tape, you're like, all right, before we go into the second tape, let's go. Drexel, I know you need to go. I'm going to ask you one last thing. And Tamra, I'd like to squeeze the jokes in after this. So we'll get to the funny. But Drexel, the one sort of big looming issue, and is, we don't quite know where it's going, is Russia and the Ukraine. How important is it for President Biden to show that he can handle this kind of crisis? I mean, it's because it could very easily spiral out of control, and people wouldn't be talking about empty supermarket shelves or gas prices if this were to go the wrong way.
Well, I think it's important on a foreign policy level. I think for the average American voter, it's not something that people are really paying attention to. But it's important for our NATO allies to know that the United States is going to be exactly where it said it's going to be on Russia. I think that after years of Donald Trump placating Vladimir Putin, this is a sharp turn back to normalcy in terms of ensuring that Russia understands that the Ukraine is a sovereign nation and that they shouldn't be invading other countries. And so, I think that one of the things that the president is going to have to be walking a fine line on right now is the fact that we aren't in any wars right now, and to put America back into a war of some sort or a battle on the ground in the Ukraine to protect them, I think is going to be really daunting to the American people, or really jarring to the American people, because we just haven't been in Afghanistan in almost a year now. And so I think he's just going to have to figure out how to explain it better if we have to get back into that, and why it's important to the United States, or to the American people, as to why the United States is actively engaged in that, and how it's going to affect. That's the thing, is that politicians don't have a hard time explaining how is it going to affect, especially on foreign policy, because we're just so used to being like, oh yeah, we're just doing this, right? But why is the relationship between the Ukraine and Russia and what's happening over there important to the American people? And I think that President Biden is going to have to explain that a little bit better.
Well, Drexel, thank you for your time as always. And
Anytime.
if people want to keep in touch with you, not just report where the potholes are at
Right here.
Drexel Heard.
Right here.
Yeah. And
Right here.
hopefully things calm down for our pal Scott Moore, so we can all be back together again. I haven't even heard from Chelsea in like a year, but hopefully we can get the whole gang back together sometime.
That'll be
soon.
fun. Maybe primary night on June 7th here in
There
California.
you go. That'll be right. Except you'll be busy that night. But
I actually might be a busy.
Well, anyway, Drexel, thank you so much for your time, and hopefully we talk to you again soon.
Thanks, everybody. Be safe and make sure you're up to date on your vaccinations, because that's really important. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
So much.
See you later.
Bye.
Tamra, in terms of, so how would you fix Ukraine? No, I'm just kidding. But in terms of an issue like that, I mean, Drexel had a good point. Like, to most viewers, most voters, viewers as well, but to most voters, it's not like their day-to-day is going to change because Russia might invade the Ukraine. But there is, it's like if you handle it badly, then all of a sudden, Kim Jong-un's like, all right, so this guy is the pushover that I thought he might be. I mean, what's the best way to kind of make a show of, just in your opinion? And maybe it's not even that important, but
well, it's what concerns me is they're preparing troops to go to Eastern Europe. That means there's just going to be more funding to the military, which means less funding to everything else that we need, everything else that is far more pressing to American lives than the massive budget that we put towards the military. So it's just another thing that and then we're going to have another, it's going to lead to a whole other generation of veterans that are going to struggle with their VA benefits and things like that. And it just, I see on a weekly basis, I'm talking to veterans who are fighting with the VA over, a life-changing disability that they got after, maybe somebody only served 1 year, but it screwed up their back enough that it's going to affect them for the rest of their life. And this person's 22 years old, so anytime anything like this happens, and it's just going to lead to a whole other generation having to deal with stuff like that.
Yeah. No,
and I like how you no, I don't have any strategy
you don't have a fix for it
on Ukraine, but I like that you didn't even give me an opportunity. Just like
no. Well, because I tossed the really tough question at you. How would you fix it?
Yes,
I
know.
Because that's what we should ask. That's what we should ask everybody. It's like, all right, Ukraine, what would you do? And just turn our mics off and just kind of look back. And like, you have 4 minutes to outline your plan. But what I know you are able to bring to not just myself, but also to our audience is some funny our jokes that we have. And I have a very specific please use this one email, which I haven't had to add that to an email in a long time. So it felt good, but I'm also going to drink some water because it's very refreshing. Oh boy, was it ever. Anyway, so we'll say goodbye with some jokes for everyone. Eric Clapton claims people vaccinated against COVID-19 are under hypnosis. Weird. That's exactly how I describe anyone who can listen all the way through that shitty slowed down acoustic version of Layla.
The Grammys are permanently moving from Los Angeles to Las Vegas. Apparently, they too have decided to give up on their dreams and host karaoke in the back of a Denny's.
More than 1,000 people gathered in Burkina Faso's capital of Ouagadougou on Tuesday in support of a military coup. The 5th coup in West and Central Africa this decade. Now make sure to get your coup card punched because the next one's going to be free.
Marine biologists in Samoa are recording fish to study their sounds. It's finally happened. Even fish now have a podcast.
Brian Williams reportedly turned down an offer to host the CBS Evening News. It's probably for the best, as network brass insisted the show would have to be retitled 3 Truths and a Lie.
President Biden was caught by a hot mic calling Fox News correspondent Pete Ducey an SOB. Fox News viewers feel the comment was distasteful since it didn't take place in a bus with Billy Bush.
And finally, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is under fire after it was revealed that he attended a birthday party his wife organized for him at 10 Downing Street in June of 2020, when indoor gatherings were banned. Nothing could highlight the difference better between the US and Canada than the possibility of ousting their leader because of too much partying, when here in this country, it kind of seems like a prerequisite to actually get the chance to lead. In any case, that is where we leave it, just over the 1 hour mark. Thank you again to Drexel. Tamra, thank you. Where can people find you?
You can find me at Hey Tamra on social media.
On the social media. And we appreciate Keith's dad. He's like, I love these. So that's, so thank you. We appreciate that. And Keith's dad, thanks for being involved. If you want to be in there every week, we appreciate it. And of course, thanks to Storage Yard Resident. And I saw Frederick in there as well, and anybody else who I happened to miss during the course of the show. As for me, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ. And please subscribe to the Blackcast YouTube channel, where you can always be notified about this show. And tomorrow we'll have a new episode of our show, Marvel Movie Talk. And then at the end of the week, episode 475 of the Blackcast. And if you haven't ever seen the Blackcast, you've got a few days to catch up on the previous 474 episodes. So get listening. I was going to say get watching, but most of them are just audio. Anyway, thank you, Tamra. Thanks again to Drexel. And we will see you probably next week right around this time. But we will talk to everybody soon. Thanks again.